There was recently a quote over the last couple of weeks from Billy Donovan in which he mentioned the potential of playing Josh Giddey and Lonzo Ball together. And then kind of revisiting that, it made me think about the fact that the Bulls' rotation, outside of being kind of a weird rotation with missing shooting, missing some defense at times, there's going to be a couple of odd men out on this rotation if everybody is actually healthy at the start of the season. We're going to talk a little bit about that and how can Billy Donovan learn to kind of balance those rotations. And early power rankings, even though we're way too early for that, has the Bulls very much entrenched in the Cooper flag race. We're going to talk about all that, plus the upgrades coming to the United Center area, all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And so, as I mentioned in the opening, there was a while ago that Billy Donovan was on a radio show, and he was asked about, Lonzo Ball's health and things like that. And he said the direct quote, "Hopefully we can get Lonzo back. He's moving closer. He's a guy that everyone enjoys playing with, and I think the same can be said for Josh." And said that he sees similarities between Josh Giddey and Lonzo and is interested in kind of playing those guys together if they're both healthy. Now, key thing is if both healthy, right? And I don't want to focus a lot on the Lonzo Ball, Josh Giddey playing together aspect of it because I think that does potentially put you right back in the situation with Josh Giddey playing with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, even though Lonzo isn't the scorer that Josh Gilgeous was. That's just a lineup where it doesn't make a lot of sense. But overall, we got to get Lonzo healthy first, right? But outside of that, it made me step back and think of that the Bulls rotation, right? And you guys know I have the Bulls starting rotation in as Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic. I think that if everybody's on the roster and healthy by the start of the season, that's the lineup you're going to go with. Ayo Dosunmu is going to thrive in that lead guard off the bench. He's still going to play more than capable starter level minutes. I'm not worried about that at all. I know some people have that concern with moving Ayo to the bench. And as I've been telling you guys for months at this point in time, like playing off the bench isn't the slight that fans thinks it is, right? I think people think, well, you're relegated to a bench player, you're not going to play a lot. It's more about the minutes if you're going to be on the bench and how you're used in those lineups. Ayo Dosunmu, with his defensive versatility, with the growth that he showed offensively last year, he's going to be the first guard off the bench. And that's even if Lonzo Ball is healthy. I just think he's going to be off the bench before Lonzo, just with the minutes restriction and thing Lonzo's going to be on and coming back after being gone from basketball for almost 3 years. It's going to be a bit before Lonzo Ball passes up even Ayo Dosunmu. But then you look at that rotation outside of that. Yes, Ayo Dosunmu's bench role is the one that is solidified. I would go so far as to say Jalen Smith as well, solidified in his bench role because he's the only other backup big that we have on an actual full NBA contract. We do have Adama Sanogo as well, but Adama Sanogo is on a two-way contract, and Jalen Smith is going to get more minutes before Adama Sanogo theoretically. Now, if Adama comes into training camp and balls out, maybe that may change a little bit, but that's where it shapes up. But then you have the rest of it, right? So Ayo Dosunmu, Jalen Smith, and I'd even say Modest Bucilis, those guys are solidified as getting minutes off your bench. That's three players right there coming off your bench. And if you've been a Bulls fan and watched Billy Donovan's coaching, he doesn't usually go more than 9 players deep consistently with a 10th man usually kind of getting in there in basically 8 to 9 minutes is basically the way that it works out. And so, especially if depending on how Billy Donovan wants to maximize those rotations, because Ayo can play multiple positions. He can play the 1, the 2, or the 3, which he did last year. And Ayo Dosunmu's minute splits, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, last year were most of his minutes, of course, at the 2 guard. But then he played more minutes at the 3 than what he did at the at even the 1 last year. So that's something that you can expect for Ayo Dosunmu. Him playing multiple positions. Matas Bucilis as well. He's another player that you look at and you say, okay, he can play the 3, and I think his primary position is probably going to be the 3 right away, just because the lack of size that he has to work on his body, things like that, his ability to slash and things like that. I think that can really benefit from him being mainly at that 3 position. And I just looked it up to verify it. So last year, Ayo Dosunmu's minute splits, I always like to fact check myself. His minute splits, 58% of his minutes were at the 2 position, 34% of his minutes was at the point guard position, and 8% of his minutes were at small forward. So I was wrong on that. He did play more minutes at point guard than small forward, which makes sense. DeMar DeRozan was basically here and always healthy. That 8% probably only came when DeMar was down. That's my fault. Didn't make any sense. That's why I always go I like to fact check myself to make sure I'm not tripping. But so you have those 3 players. The fact that they can also play multiple positions. Matas at the we've even seen Matas play some minutes at the 2 in summer league. I don't know if he's going to do that at the NBA level. I always go back to like Kevin Durant as he was filling out his body. He started off his career, I believe, the first 2 years playing at the 2. So that's not outside the realm of possibility, maybe, right? But Matas being able to play multiple, Jalen Smith can play the 4 or the 5 to maximize on their minutes, and Ayo Dosunmu as well. So that's your 8-player rotation, with your flex guy at the 9 either coming down to, in my opinion, either Torrey Craig, Julian Phillips, and maybe even Ernelat Batum if he's fully healthy and ready to go, right? And that's an if. So that's kind of your guy you're flexing at that 9 or the 10 spot, depending on, again, those are guys that can play multiple positions. Batum at the 2 and 3, Julian Phillips at the 3 and 4, and Torrey Craig at the 3 and 4. And we also saw Billy Donovan use him as a small ball 5 last year, which could be concerning. Julian Phillips also in a Billy Donovan team can play the small ball 5. So not saying that that's optimal, but that's looking at how Billy Donovan can use that rotation. That leaves certain guys potentially out of the rotation completely, and that's where it gets a little interesting for how the Bulls are going to balance this rotation, right? So when you look at who's the odd man out, the guys who are the candidates to be the odd man out, notice I didn't mention Chris Duarte. Maybe he does leapfrog a guy like Dalen Terry because of him being longer in the NBA and what he did do his rookie year, even though he's kind of fallen off the 2 years since then. Dalen Terry's definitely a guy who could be the odd man out of the rotation. And then you still got to say that Torrey Craig or Julian Phillips could be that odd man out, depending on if, like, Ernelat Batum's shooting comes in, and now that he's had that eye surgery, he posted the hype video. It was great to see. If he comes in and his shooting and off-ball creation and things like that, I like he could maybe even leapfrog some of those guys. So it's going to be a balancing. I can notice in all that, I really didn't even mention Lonzo Ball. If he's fully healthy, he's going to get some minutes if healthy, I think, because of, if nothing else, his ability to shoot and his defense. Again, defense does rely on that knee, right? Both of those things kind of do. So it depends on how healthy Zoe is and how much he does show in his healthy minutes. But this is not a simple and easy rotation to fix. And then when you balance out as well as defensive needs, getting out in transition, the shooting aspect just kind of brings some shooting, right? So that rotation that Billy Donovan has to strike is going to be interesting. Billy Donovan is a guy who we've seen it. Like, we've seen games where Javonte Green just sat on the bench. Derrick Jones Jr., who helped the Mavs go on a finals run and was a big part of being a solid role player for that team, didn't even get consistent minutes here. Andre Drummond, as good as he was in a Bulls uniform, there are some games where he played 8 minutes, right? So the balancing act that Billy Donovan has to do here, he has to thread that needle so intentionally that it's a little concerning, wondering how exactly he's gonna balance that out. And while I like a lot of the young talent that we got here, you also have to factor in the youth movement. How much of that youth movement is the focus as well, is wanting to take a look at the young guys. Because I'll tell you what, if it comes down to Torrey Craig or Julian Phillips getting that backup 4 minutes, right? If it comes down to him, if the youth and developing the youth is the focus there, it very well could be Julian Phillips could get the nod over Torrey Craig at that point. Or are we going to see what I think may be the most likely scenario? And this could come at the kind of behest of developing the young players, is that will Billy Donovan start off the season? We already got Zach LaVine. We know we got Nikola Vucevic still on that roster. I got them in the starting lineup. But will maybe Billy Donovan play a Torrey Craig more at the start of the season to maybe up his trade value so that you can try to move him to a contender by the trade deadline? But at that point, the trade deadline is basically 2/3 of the way through the season. What does that then do for a player like Julian Phillips if he shows that he's ready for a role in training camp? But I also don't overlook that aspect of it. Now, one player that I don't have is the ball-headed hoe, Javon Carter. I don't expect Javon Carter to really play very many minutes. I don't. I expect him to just be out of the rotation, basically. But, I mean, I could be wrong on that, too. I want to give the credence to that. The players that I kind of have out of it that I haven't mentioned a lot are Chris Duarte and Javon Carter. I've mentioned it. As bad as Javon Carter was for the Chicago Bulls, and as much as I throw a lot of shade to Javon Carter, he earned it. Is that we've seen players before have bad first seasons with a new team, and then they acclimate in their second season. So maybe Javon Carter, as that defender and shooter that we had hoped that we were going to get when we signed him, maybe he does show that a little bit more. But then again, you're still at the deepest position of the Chicago Bulls at that guard position, and that raises some questions there as well, right? But Chris Duarte is a player, and I think I'm going to do a video on Chris Duarte tonight. You guys know, kind of during the offseason, every once in a while, I drop nightly videos. These are dailies. I drop nightlies where I kind of pick one topic, and it's a shorter video, maybe 5 to 8 minutes, and I go into things. Let me know down below if you guys would be interested in me kind of going in exactly into kind of more high-level video on Chris Duarte, where he likes his shots, things like that, a role that he could work out to. Let me know if you guys would be interested in that down below. But Chris Duarte is a guy as well that is going to be looking to prove some things, right? He's going to be trying to stay healthy, prove himself as a defender and shooter at the minimum. He's still a player that can isolate a little bit, but with guards that we have in Ayo Dosunmu and Josh Giddey and Duarte's defensive versatility, that could as well be something that propels him early in the lineup. But again, I kind of have those guys already as the outskirts. And then a player that I haven't mentioned a whole lot is Dalen Terry. Now, Dalen and his multiple position versatility as well could be something that could throw another wrench in the lineups, because if Dalen Terry takes another step, and he did take a small step last season, and just looking like he can stay on the floor and at least be that transition guard that can get a steal, that can help get you out in transition, rebound kind of well, then it makes it even more interesting. Now, we're very wing heavy, and I know Bulls fans are hoping that we were going to see the end of the small ball. No, you're going to see a lot of small ball here with the Chicago Bulls. It's not just Billy Donovan. He plays a part into it, but it's also the roster that we have. You have to play who you have on your roster. We have a small roster, so you're going to see some small ball moments from the Bulls, and that could open up minutes at positions that you don't necessarily expect players to play at. Like I've said, Torrey Craig as a small ball 5 in some lineups, Julian Phillips as a small ball 5 in some lineups. You can see those type of things happening under a Billy Donovan coach team. And so when you look at like the two-way players, and I've seen a lot of people ask, what is it going to be for Adama Sanogo? Now DJ Stewart, right, and Andrew Funk as the two-way players. Unfortunately, I just don't see, unless a trade is coming and comes at some point, those guys getting a whole lot of NBA opportunity with the roster that we have and trying to figure out that balance. But maybe I'm wrong. Again, we'll see. The bigger question is how long does it take Billy Donovan to figure out that roster balance? And it could be a minute. Don't want to lie. It could very well be a minute. But moving on from that and talking about the roster, the performance of the roster is the thing that you ask any Bulls fan, you're going to get a different answer. That's just the way that it's gone this offseason. I talked about it yesterday. You have Bulls fans that can see this team winning more games than last season. You see Bulls fans that think this team is going to struggle to win 30 games. The truth is probably going to be somewhere in the middle, and we'll see. And some of that is determined by players taking steps and leaps and things like that. But so far, there have been outlets that have already released their preseason power rankings. Now, I want to be clear here. It is way too freaking early for preseason power rankings. It just is. But hey, that's where we are right now. And, most teams have kind of settled in what their rosters are going to be. The Lauri Markkanen trade is maybe one that could really disturb some things, depending on if he goes to the Spurs or the Golden State Warriors, or the two teams that have been mentioned the most is kind of interested in him. But the Athletic ranked the Chicago Bulls at number 25 in their power rankings. They had them ranking they had it in tiers. So the Cooper flag positioning tier is where they have the Bulls. We're positioned in that tier with the Pistons, the Trailblazers, the Hornets, Nets, and the Wizards in there, with the Jazz right above that team in the next tier up. So that's where the Athletic has the Bulls. And then ESPN and Bleacher Report also released their rankings. They also have the Bulls ranked at 25th with the same teams: the Pistons, the Trailblazers, the Hornets, the Nets, and the Wizards. What does that mean? While Bulls fans and a lot of us share some optimism that this team could be better, that when it comes together with Josh Giddey stepping into a true point guard role and thriving in that, hoping that Kobe White takes another step, Ayo Dosunmu, Zach LaVine being healthy. It's something that all these articles mentioned as well, is that, the presence of Zach LaVine, how that could change where they look at the Bulls being ranked and things like that. But right now, nationally, a lot of teams don't have the Bulls ranked as being good. And, when you have them ranked as 25th, that does put the Bulls in a position to potentially keep their top 10 protected pick to the San Antonio Spurs, which is going to be music to a lot of Bulls fans' ears, even though, like I've said before, please do some research on some players other than Cooper Flagg, because I don't want Bulls fans to be disappointed if we even do, if we are bad and we don't win the lottery and then think, oh, we're not going to get Flagg. What does it matter? There are some really, really good players in this draft. Drake Powell at that wing, which don't think we'll be looking at the wing with Modest Busilis, but and Patrick Williams locked in the deals for a long time. Ace Bailey would be a great one. Now, if we do get Ace Bailey, with what he could be at the shooting guard position, maybe that does mean that we move on from a Kobe White. You never know. Dylan Harper is another one that I think is really good, but he's a shooting guard / point guard. So, you look at those type of things. But you guys know, one of the guys that I'm focused on the most in this draft is that center out of Duke, Malik, however you pronounce his name. I'm going to work on it well before the draft, but he's another one that I think could really, really perform well and come into a starting center position for the Chicago Bulls. And then we already got our backup situation kind of figured out, right? So Isaiah Evans is another really good one to look at in that draft. So there are really good players. I say all that to say there are really good players in this draft. And there are players that absolutely can help the Chicago Bulls and maybe be players that you could build your franchise around going forth into the future. Now, that's not 100% guaranteed. Nobody is, but I'll tell you what, he'll be 20 years old when he's drafted, around 19 when he's drafted, almost 20. Malik, 7'2", 250 pounds. That Duke, and the Duke, basically, if you hope that the Chicago Bulls are going to be bad next season to keep their top 10 pick, watch a lot of Duke basketball, because there are 3 players on that Duke team that can all go in the top 10 that could drastically help the Chicago Bulls next year. But that's not what we're here to talk about. But the power rankings have the Bulls struggling next year. And I think that there's a lot of reason to believe that, right? When you look at it, this is a new team. Even if you think that this team is going to put it all together, yeah, we got some young, hungry players that are out to prove people wrong. It could take a while before all those things get on the right path. We're not only just adapting new players and players going into new roles, right? Yeah, Kobe was a starter last year, but now he's going to off-ball guard rather than being the point guard, even though he played a lot of on-ball last year. You're reintroducing Zach LaVine. You're missing a player that got so many shots for you and key shots in DeMar DeRozan that now you're hoping other players step into. So, and then as well as a rookie that you're adapting, a second-year player in Julian Phillips, right? So everybody stepping into new roles, and it can take a minute for everything to congeal the way that you hope it's going to on paper, which could lead to some early struggles. On top of, the Bulls won a lot of clutch games last season, and we were missing our best clutch player in DeMar DeRozan. Hopefully somebody steps up. We still have Kobe, who was really good in clutch minutes last season as well. So maybe he's ready to step into that role. But it all boils down to just this. It's not going to be easy for the Bulls next season. And people who think that the Bulls are just going to have a cakewalk into getting into at least the play-in, I just don't see that possible. And it seems like the national media backs that up. We'll see, though. So, for those, it's just an interesting talking point for those that hope that the Bulls are going to keep their top 10 pick, and for those that think that the Bulls are too good to keep their top 10 pick. But that all could drastically change, as well as if the Bulls find takers for Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic over the course of the season, maybe even Torrey Craig as well, right? So we'll see what happens with that. But as of right now, those 3 outlets, ESPN, Bleacher Report, The Athletic, all have the Bulls right now ranked at 25th. But it wouldn't be the first time that the Bulls ranked low and end up actually exceeding those expectations after kind of revamping their team. So we'll see what comes to that. But with that said as well, I want to get into this. And I know this isn't going to be, this next topic isn't going to be things that everybody's interested in, but the owners of the United Center, which comes down to the Reinsdorfs and the Wirtz family, right? The owners of the Blackhawks, the owners of the Chicago Bulls and the White Sox, even though the White Sox obviously don't play at the United Center, they announced a $7 billion mixed-use campus that they're gonna bring. So basically, the parking lots and areas surrounding the United Center, they're going to be revamping those. It's called the 1901 project. If it's improved, it's a 10-year development that would take the west side of Chicago and transform it into mixed income housing, a music hall, and more. And the construction will be planned in 7 phases. And for what it's worth, the president of the United Center said this: "We think that this project is going to send a powerful, positive message to the world, and is going to showcase how Chicago and Illinois continue to set new standards in partnership, architecture, community, commitment, growth, all on the heels of what we know is going to be a successful DNC, Democratic National Convention. Jerry Reinsdorf was quoted as specifically saying, and understood our responsibility to give back through our charity arms by seeking out economic opportunities for our neighbors who live and work in and around the United Center. It's fitting that we announce this project today, as we also remember Rocky Warts, who was more than my business partner and confidant. He was my dear friend. Today's announcement builds on the effort led by both families to leave a lasting legacy on the West Side. So, and something I didn't know as well that was quoted in this, the United Center area is the second busiest area in America, according to that development team. It hosts 3 million guests annually, and the arena, which was built 30 years ago with no government funding. Keep in mind, when you look at the Bears trying to build a new arena, they are trying to get some funding from the government. They're also doing no government funding for the 1901 project. So, hey, it's interesting to see. We're seeing more and more, right? And we knew that that's initially what the Bears wanted to do with the Arlington Heights project, is build up a community around an arena, right? So you have music, you have theater, you have restaurants and things like that. So the fact that now the Warts family and the Reinsdorf are combining to get that done and trying to do that around the west side of Chicago, listen, it can't be nothing but good for the city of Chicago. They actually said that this project could create tons of new jobs, permanent jobs. Of course, it's going to create some initial construction jobs and opportunities around the city of Chicago, but it seems like this is something that's also going to build off the back of getting other jobs in Chicago, and that's something that you can never be mad at, it bringing positivity to the city of Chicago. So, listen, great to hear this. It said that it will create 4,000 construction jobs, over 1,900 permanent jobs, and $275 million annually in economic impact. So we'll see, man. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that one. But guys, that's the show for today. Let me know what you guys think. For those that do live in Chicago, to hear about them building up now the west side, the area around the United Center. Let me know what you guys think on all that down below. That's my time. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.